Superannuation is one of the most powerful tools for wealth creation available to any working Australian. As it's mandated by the government, it's for savings for your retirement. Currently, your employer has to put 10% additional aside from your wages or salary. So they work out what your wage or salary for the fortnight or the week or the month is, and then an additional 10%, they have to put that aside and send it to a superannuation fund. The superannuation fund has the job of investing your money, and it's pooled with the money of many other people, with the intention of both getting the best return on your investment and keeping it relatively safe. I'll do some future videos on how superannuation funds work in detail, but today I just want to talk about how superannuation works in general. Generally, you can't access your superannuation funds until a certain age. Currently in Australia, retirement age is 65, so you have to wait until that point in time to be able to access them. Now, what's happening is that the age at which people will be able to access the old age pension from the government is 66.5 years, and it's actually increasing to 67 years from the 1st of July 2023. A young man starting out in the workforce today shouldn't expect the old age pension to be as generous as it is now, or maybe even to exist at all. So it's vitally important that Aussie men understand how superannuation works and makes it work for them. While successive governments have modified the system, the underlying principles of superannuation have remained the same. Superannuation is a way that people during their working life can save up enough and invest enough so that during their retirement they can financially support themselves and not having to rely on the government. Now, if you think you want to have just an average retirement, then all you need to do is just check that your superannuation fund isn't charging really high fees and you'll be set to go. But if you're wanting to maybe eat out every night or travel or live a bit more of an adventurous life and a bit more of a luxurious life in your retirement, then you're going to need to do more than average. And that's going to be saving extra at least 10%. That would be my suggestion. Start off with 10 and build it even bigger as you go. You do have to be mindful though that the government does put a limit, a cap on how much you can contribute each year before you're actually going to have to pay higher taxes. And I'll explain that a little bit more in a few moments. When you start your first job, whether fresh out of high school, TAFE or university, I suggest that you immediately say to your employer that you'd like to salary sacrifice 10% of your wage into super. If you do this from the start, you're never going to miss the money. It's not going to end up in your bank account. You're not going to be tempted to spend it instead of save it. It's a really wise way to start off on your career, putting that extra 10% in from the start. You'll never miss it. You won't have to worry about it. It'll be there, building up for your savings for your retirement. This is the same principle the tax office uses when they take their cut of your pay before you even see it. If it was left to the average Aussie to put aside their tax obligation each year and hand it over in one lump sum at the end of June, the tax office would never see that money. We're not very good at putting aside money and keeping it so that we don't spend it. The average person will spend the money they have, so you really need to make sure that you're saving before you're spending. Let's have a look at how that salary sacrifice might impact your take-home pay. For the average 20 to 24-year-old Australian male, their weekly earnings are about $1,100. This is the amount of money before the tax office takes their share. So let's look at how this would look with and without salary sacrifice. First, let's look what happens without the salary sacrifice. Of the $1,100, the tax office will take $197, leaving you with $903. Now, if you've done tertiary study, then the tax office will take a bit more to cover your study or training support loan. Instead of $197, they'll take $219 and leave you with $881. Now, instead of doing that, you ask your employer to salary sacrifice into super 10% of your wage. They'll take $110, that's 10% of the $1,100, and send it to your superannuation fund, usually once a month, sometimes quarterly. This will leave you $990. Now, the tax office then takes their cut from that. They take their cut of $158, leaving you $832. Or if you have the study loan, they'll take $168 and leave you $822. By salary sacrificing, you're taking home $71 less, and if it's a study loan, you're taking home $59 less than if you didn't sacrifice. Now, the $110 that your employer sent to your superannuation fund is taxed at 15%, so it ends up being $93.50. If we add this to the new take-home amount, you're already between $22.50 and $39.50 better off. Over the course of the year, this is between $1,100 and $2,000. Over 40 years, and with the power of compounding interest, this small move could mean an extra $1 million in retirement. Now, at this median wage, you're unlikely to reach what the government calls the concessional cap. Now, that's going to change as you get older and you get pay increases and salary increases and you start to take on higher paying jobs and go up in your career. So you might get to a point where the contributions from your employer and your salary sacrifices might exceed that cap. And currently it's about $27,500, and it gets adjusted every few years in line with inflation. So it's best to check the ATO website. But if you do get to a point where your combination of your boss's contribution or your employer's contribution and your contribution from salary sacrifice nears that cap, you may need to reduce your contribution to a lower amount than 10%. Let's see the difference if you sacrifice into superannuation and if you don't. Let's start with that $1,100. If we do that, your current employer needs to contribute 10% of this to superannuation fund account. In the fund, you pay 15% tax on the contribution from your employer. Now, you don't have to worry about paying that in your yearly tax. The superannuation fund worries about that for you and does it all for you. So on earnings of $1,100, your employer will send your superannuation fund $110 for each week you work. Now, the tax office then takes 15% of that, so as we said before. Now, that's $16.50. That leaves $93.50 as a contribution to your retirement. Now, over the year, that will be a contribution of $4,862. If you also sacrifice 10% of your earnings, then these contributions together would be $187 per week, and over a year it would be $9,724, so nearly $10,000 a year, just on that median salary. Now, if you started working at 25 and worked until 65, you'd have the following retirement amount based on the above figures. Now, if you get a 6% average return, which is doable, you would have just over $800,000 if you didn't salary sacrifice, and over $1.6 million if you did do the salary sacrifice. Now, you've got to remember, this is actually without increasing the pay over time, and you're likely to earn more money, you're likely to get a pay rise, you're likely to hopefully move up in your career as you get older. So the amounts you'll be sacrificing and your employer will be putting in will increase as well. Now, if you could get your average return over those 40 years to 10%, and that's really pushing it, but maybe you could, then the numbers would be $2.37 million if you didn't if you didn't salary sacrifice, and $4.74 million if you did salary sacrifice. So that's a huge amount of money in retirement. Now, if we take that last number, that $4.74 million, if you took out $1 million at 65 to live on during your retirement for the next 10 years, so you said, okay, I'll take $1 million and I'll live off that till I'm 75, and you left the rest to continue growing, what's left by the time you're 75 would be worth nearly $10 million. Now, that's the power of compounding and the knowledge that it takes time. You have to start as early as you can with superannuation. And I'd even advocate, if you're a young person working, getting your first part-time job at 15, to start thinking about, could I set up my own superannuation account? Because unfortunately, employers at that age don't have to put any money in for you. But if you could set up your own and go to some of the funds that allow 15-year-olds to set up their accounts, then go and put some money in now, because that extra 10 years can make a huge difference at the end when you're going to retire. So let's bring all that together. In summary, superannuation is a forced savings for your retirement. If you want a better retirement, then you need to add extra to your super, and the earlier you add the extra, the better. And my suggestion is that you aim to put an extra 10% in as a minimum when you start working out, and build up to that concessional cap. Well, hopefully that's helped you understand what superannuation is. And as always, keep being a better Aussie man.